Our story begins in winter 2003. A volunteer caretaker at a South Omaha cemetery is clearing brush when he makes a discovery. The scene is Laurel Hill Cemetery, a cemetery that is visible from the Kennedy Freeway connecting Bellevue and South Omaha, yet most who drive by hardly notice, if at all. Laurel Hill is the final resting place to many relatives of Omaha's elite. Fred Astaire's grandparents are interned here, as well as many mayors of the city of South Omaha, which was its own municipality at the end of the 1800s. The majority of the people buried here are immigrants from other countries, with Germany and other Eastern European countries. But back to our story. Our volunteer caretaker is clearing some brush and discovers several barely visible graves on the far southeast corner of the cemetery. These headstones are barely legible, so he contacts a coworker he knows is interested in history and asks her to take a look. What she will find will inspire her to undertake a decade in the years following will result in the dedication of a memorial honoring African American veterans who fought 150 years earlier in the American Civil War.
Edward Jones was born in 1848 in Franklin, Virginia. While no records of Jones exist before his entrance into the United States Army, it is plausible to assume that he was a slave according to Virginia's status as a state that allowed slavery before and during the Civil War. According to records obtained regarding Jones's enlistment, he gave his occupation as a farmer. On September 1st, 1864, Jones traveled to Marietta, Georgia, and enlisted in the United States Army. He was assigned to Company B of the 9th Regiment of the United States Colored Heavy Artillery. The 9th USCHA was stationed out of Nashville, Tennessee, but was not recorded to have seen action. Knowing what we have learned about the role of African American soldiers during the war, it is plausible to believe that his regiment was used for general labor. But since Jones was in a heavy artillery regiment, this is unlikely. At some point during 1865, Jones was transferred to Company I of the 13th United States Colored Infantry, or USCT. According to records, the 13th USCT served as guards to railroads in both Tennessee and Alabama, but saw action and repulse of Confederate General Hood's attack on Johnsville, Tennessee in September 1864. The 13th was also involved in the Battle of Nashville in December 1864. It is not known whether or not Jones personally saw action, but according to the records, it was plausible. On July 7, 1865, the 13th USCT was transferred to St. Louis, Missouri, where it was later mustered out or disbanded. It is not known why Jones migrated to Omaha, but having ended his military career in Missouri, it can be assumed that he traveled the short distance from St. Louis to Omaha. Jones was recorded to have lived on 819 North 27th Street in Omaha and died of dropsy and was buried in Laurel Hill on May 10, 1905. It was the discovery of Jones's grave that started the process of recognizing all the Civil War veterans buried at Laurel Hill.
This uniform seen here dates to the Civil War, but is not necessarily what colored soldiers wore. Instead, it belongs to a member of the New York militia. Although not a colored unit, it shares many similarities from the uniforms July Miles, Josiah Waddle, and Edward Jones wore in the field. The jacket is made of thick wool with a lining on the inside for comfort. It ends at the knee. The boots are made of leather and the pants are tucked into the boot. The pants are waxy and lightweight. The belt is white with a bronze belt buckle. The buckle is emblazoned with a large eagle. The other strap is attached to the ammo box and placed around the waist. The ammo box is wooden and covered in leather.
Our group interviewed Creola Woodall, a respected community activist and minister in North Omaha. She gave a deeply personal account describing the discovery of Edward Jones and the other African American veterans of the Civil War buried in Laurel Hill Cemetery.
It was very, very an emotional time for me to finally come face to face or with the headstone of someone who wanted the freedom that I also wanted growing up in Mississippi, but he wanted it even more. I had a little bit more, even though it was subjugated, I had a little bit more than what he had. And as we went and we contacted the gentleman that heads up the Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C. We got on the internet and we just started looking everywhere that we possibly could. And so he, in turn, sent us a picture of Edward Jones' name that is on this Civil War memorial. And then he also told us how we could go into the National Archives and start requesting, mustard papers and anything that pertained to him. And we went to the Historical Society, and in the process, we learned that there had been a bounty for him. He had been a runaway slave, and he was held in jail in Tennessee. And the Union redeemed him out for $50, $25 up front, should he fight for the Union. And if they won the war, the agreement was Lincoln would free the slaves and he would get his freedom. And so that's how he became a free man. What led him from Chappaquiddick, where he fought down there, down south in that era, to Omaha, I don't know. I don't know if I will ever know. Maybe it was simply because of his experience growing up in the South. He knew that once he had his freedom, he was coming north. And I don't know if, he traveled with the Underground Railroad, if that's what brought him here, but he ended up here in Omaha, Nebraska. And after learning that, and we got a hold to the manifest for the cemetery, and we began to look at it, and we discovered that not only was Edward Jones back there, but James Adams' cemetery. And we went to Metro Tech and went through the historical museum there, and we looked at everybody that was buried in Laurel Hills. And as we looked at the manifest for the cemetery, we found out that if they was buried there, they wrote colored by their name. And as we continued to research, we found out that, oh my God, Edward Jones and James Adams are not the only people back here. There were 58 other people buried back there. And that again became another thing that was really emotional for me, because I found out that there were these 58 black people buried at the back of this grave. And the freedom that the 56 had to come here was a result of what the first two, James Adams and Edward Jones, did. It is very, when I think about it, it's still very emotional for me, because they would have never, even though they ended up at the back of the cemetery, they still had freedom. They found their way to Omaha, Nebraska, and they have freedom, even if their lives were short, because some of them didn't live very long lives. Edward Jones died when he was 45, so he didn't have a long life, but he found freedom. And that, it makes me sad that, he fought so hard and didn't get a chance to really enjoy it, but it also makes me happy to know that there were others that had a chance to have some taste of freedom because of their sacrifice.
On July 3, 2011, the Laurel Hill Preservation Society held a ceremony dedicating a memorial commemorating the lives of African American soldiers who fought for our country. The efforts of Crayola Woodall and many other tireless volunteers will live forever on the grounds of Laurel Hill through a permanent fixture that will remind the community of its African American history.
Those black veterans and settlers who lie here, they struggled, preserved and sought better days. We are the beneficiaries of their dreams and endurances from the battlefields. They fought with force and purpose, knowing the dangers they faced, yet never wavering from their journey. In the shadows, they held freedom in view.